Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got another good one for you today. Today, we talk with Jeff Lund. Jeff is a native Alaskan, and he's been hunting in Alaska most of his life, and what to him seems like every day is a pretty big adventure, I think, to the rest of us. So I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but I want to thank Jeff, of course, for coming on the podcast. I know you guys will enjoy some of the crazy stories that he shared with us today, including actually an engagement of all damn things. So thanks again, Jeff. Now, to all you listeners, please make sure you go out there and follow us on Instagram, share the podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star review, all that stuff. You know what you're supposed to do. Let's go ahead and kick this thing off and let Jeff tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, Jeff, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, man. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I'm excited that you're here. You're another, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love it when people reach out to me and say, hey, I got some crazy stories. And you reach out to me saying, I got some stuff I got to tell you. And so thank you, of course, for doing that. It makes my job easier, and I often find that they're my favorite stories. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's great. I like reaching out to people who are just getting started, people who have been around for a little bit, but providing a different perspective. I'm not sure if a lot of people actually know Alaskans.
No.
And that's the reason I started my podcast in 2017. It was just kind of giving a year-round view of what it's like to live in Alaska. I love hearing people come up to Alaska and tell their story about their 10-day hunt or 2-week hunt. It's such a great listen, but also, be able to provide a year-round local perspective, I think is a cool thing too.
That's awesome. Yeah, Alaska is really high up on my bucket list, particularly caribou. But let's take one step back. Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks that don't know who you are already?
Okay. Jeff Lund. I live in Ketchikan, Alaska. I grew up on Prince of Wales Island and then went to college in Arizona for the obvious reasons. I wanted a nice, dry climate. I wanted sun. I didn't want rain anymore.
Yeah.
Taught high school in California for a couple of years and moved back home in 2013. Now teach in Ketchikan at Ketchikan High School. Write an outdoors column for the Juneau Empire. Written 2 books, A Miserable Paradise, Life in Southeast Alaska, as well as Beyond the Hunt, which was released earlier this year. And I do a podcast called the On Step Alaska Podcast.
That's awesome, man. You were dabbling in it all. I want to ask questions about teaching. What do you teach?
I teach high school English and journalism. So
Okay.
Up here, it's pretty nice. They do it by topics. So your junior and senior year, you're not taking like, this is your junior English textbook and this is your senior English textbook. We do topical. So I teach adventure, survival lit, science fiction lit, and sports lit,
cool.
which is pretty fun. So
You like basically named off all the ones I'd actually be interested in. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of other ones I'd also be interested in, but those 3 are great. Both of my folks were in education. So my mom was a teacher.
Oh, cool.
My dad started as a teacher. He eventually moved into admin. He ended up being a principal and working at the district. But I have a lot of respect for people that do what you do. It's not easy. People think it's easy. It's not. It's a lot of work. So, and you're changing lives. My mom, she talks to students from 25 years ago, like on the regular. So, good on you, man. That's an awesome career.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm not sure if I would have. The COVID was pretty tough, and I have some friends still in California that were teaching through COVID. And I thought, man, I've never wanted to be on an island in rural Alaska so badly than during COVID, because things were a lot more reasonable here. It was pretty crazy, but still things were a lot better. The kids were able to go out. Like, we didn't have class on Fridays when we were at 50% capacity. So like during the rut, most of the kids were out hunting. And so they'd come in on school Monday. Mr. Lund, sorry, I missed office hours on Friday. I was out hunting. I was like, you know what? That's a pretty good excuse.
Yeah. You're like, I'm giving you extra credit.
Yeah. So pretty good ways that they could cope. And a lot of them went kayaking and halibut fishing and stuff like that. So it was a lot of them found very healthy alternatives to dealing with that, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, we all know why we're here. We're here to hear some of your favorite hunting stories. So there's no reason to beat around the bush. Why don't you, I know you got a couple for us. Why don't you set the stage for the first story and we'll dive into it, man.
Tonight my wife is making mountain goat tacos. And so in that light, I'll start off with the hunt on which we got engaged. So it was a couple of years ago. There's a mountain that's relatively close to town, but it's kind of a pain to get to. And there's rumors there were some mountain goats up there. So it's a registration tag for us residents up here. If you're a non-resident, you have to get a guide, so it's pretty expensive. So In June, I went out with a buddy out in a boat, and then you have to rode our bikes, I think 9 miles or something like that. And then you hike another 3 miles to get up to the top. So I'd scouted this, and I took my buddy up there, and I was like, I just want to see if this is doable. Is it reasonable to expect that we can bike back here and then hike here, or we can have access to the Alpine where the goats might be? So in June, went up there and checked it out and thought, all right, this is doable. So I got home and I thought, you know what, I'm going to propose on this hunt. And this was actually in 2020. And like, my wife likes hunting. This isn't something that's like, I just wanted to be able to tell the story because I love to hunt, and I'm going to propose on the hunt. And she's like indifferent, or she hates hunting, but she's into hunting. So I figured it'd be kind of a cool experience. That's pretty unique.
Yeah.
So
is she a native Alaskan as well?
She grew up actually in Lexington, Massachusetts, and she got her PhD at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. And she actually was up visiting a friend on Prince of Wales a couple of years ago, and she'd been up here kayaking Glacier Bay and then hiking the Chilkoot Trail. And I thought, wow, she's pretty impressive. I mean, she's working on a PhD in ecology, and she likes to hike and do all this stuff. So I thought, I gotta meet this girl. I gotta know this girl. So went on a couple dates, like long distance types of. I went down to Colorado for our first date, and we did some camping and backpacking. So our entire relationship has been built around outdoor adventures and stuff. I'm not sure if we've ever like dressed up and gone to a restaurant before. So
no dinner and a movie for you guys.
No. So I figured that proposing on a hunt would be something that would be pretty cool, pretty special, and up her alley too, not just mine. So she comes up, and at this point she was still finishing the PhD, so it was like a seasonal thing. I went down there for the summers, and then she'd come up for weeks during the year when I was teaching. So we take the boat out, and I'm stinking nervous because I'm thinking, where do you put the ring? I can't put it in my hunting pant pockets. So I go kill kit. So I put the rings in the box in the kill kit. And I want to get a mountain goat. It's a registration thing. So I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be special. I'm going to shoot this mountain goat. It's going to be my first mountain goat. And then once I'm done, once we're done taking care of the animal, then I'm going to propose. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'm sure there's going to be something that just comes to me at the moment. So we do the bike riding, and it's so steep in one part. We have to walk our bikes up. So that kind of sucks, but it's all right. It starts to rain, and when you get wet from the hike and then you have to camp that night and you wake up and everything's damp, it's just kind of miserable. So like your boots are wet and everything else just kind of wet and damp. And so woke up in the morning and I was excited, but I was also just, kind of uncomfortable for the dampness. And then the stuff that I had scouted, and when my buddy and I went up in June and checked it out, it looked pretty doable. But as we started actually doing it, it became miserable. And there's this Devil's Club, and it was thick brush. And Devil's Club is do you know what Devil's Club is?
I don't actually. I've heard of it, but I've never really inquired.
Yeah, it's this plant that can get to like 6-8 feet tall, but the entire stalk of it has these spines that break off. So it's like a temperate rainforest cactus. And even on the underside of these huge leaves that can be like basketball size, there's spines underneath them too. So sometimes when you're going up these hills, there's really nothing to grab onto except for berry bushes. And sometimes you just grab onto something and it's Devil's Club. And then all the spines like break off into your hand, and it's horrible. So just horrible plants. So we're hiking up through all that stuff, and it takes about 3 hours for us just to get to the subalpine. Miserable. I think it was about 2.5 miles. And so a lot of these spots that you're hiking up here, you don't have like trails. You're following a game trail that doesn't exactly coincide with where you want to go. It's where the animals want to go. And it's really thick because it is a temperate rainforest. So if you're averaging 0.8 or 1 mile an hour, that's pretty good. So we're wet from the sweat. We're wet from the rain. So we get to the spot where we're about to start hunting, and it already sucks horribly. It's making memories in just the worst possible way. And then to boot, it's foggy, so we can hardly even see the mountain. So I'm thinking, man, this is not good. Can't even see anything. So we take a little bit of a break, we're eating some food, and then the mountain just starts to clear. And I think, okay, here it is. Here's the turn. This is the positive turn. We've endured the conflict. Now the sun's going to come out. There's going to be a goat. It's going to be perfect. No goats. So we decided to keep hiking up. Usually around 3,000 feet of elevation is kind of where once you get above that, that's kind of where you start seeing some goats down here. Again, coming from sea level up to 3,000 feet. 3,000 feet in Colorado is nowhere. You have to dig a hole to get
Yeah.
that low, right?
Yeah. You're headed to Kansas.
Yeah. So we start heading up the ridge, and I see a nice buck looking at us. Oh, cool! Look at that buck. And then walk a little bit further. There's another buck. Oh man, that's cool. Looking a little bit further, there's another buck. I'm thinking, man, there's a lot of bucks, and there's a couple of these bucks are pretty nice. And I'm just passing up these bucks to get to look for a mountain goat, but I'm not seeing any mountain goats. And it's getting later in the day, so I think, all right, maybe we got to do something about this. And Abby she's very patient. She's very gritty. She doesn't whine, but I could tell she had her fun, and she would not be disappointed if I shot a buck. So finally see a buck that's a nice buck. It's got thick bases, good mass on my hip. That we're not gonna go home empty-handed, and I got to propose. So I get a decent rest, and I just airmail a shot, and then second shot, same thing. This thing is about 125 yards, just standing there, and I'm spraying shots all over the place. And Abby's kind of looking at me like, what's going on here? Like, is the rifle off? Is the scope off? I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm just nervous about like the proposal thing. Like I have to kill this deer, and I'm not relaxed. I'm not controlling my breathing. I'm just nervous as all heck. So put the fourth one in there, shoot it, drop it. I'm like, oh man, finally four shots to kill this one deer.
Through all four?
Just stood there. It was like, yeah, sometimes they're really spooky, but I think that I was shooting high, so it was going over. If you shoot low, then it might get startled by the bullet hitting a rock or something like that. So I think I was just airmailing them high, and so it was like hitting back behind it.
Got it.
So buck gets down, and then start taking care of the deer, and I'm very, very careful when I get into the game bag. I like hand her the gloves, and I hand her knife, and I do all that stuff and notch the tag, and I keep the ring box in there. And so job is done, and I don't know what I'm going to say. I'm thinking, okay, what do I do? It's like now the time all the meat's packed up. We got it in the bags. What do I do? What do I say? And so she happens to turn around, and she's looking at a different mountain with the binoculars looking for a mountain goat. And so I don't even know what I said, but I just got down on one knee, gave her the ring. She said yes. And then we had to hike out. And so whenever she tells the story about how horrible the hunt was. But she says it ended up being okay because we got engaged. But I was like, yeah, man, that was bad planning on my part. But
I think I'd like to hear her version of the story more than yours, Jeff. I think it probably has a lot more details. But that's awesome, man. That's the official first engagement story told on the Hunting Stories podcast.
Well, I know you have a poop story, and so I didn't want to be the second poop story. So I figured which one might be the most unique. And so proposing on a hunt was good. And then also, I learned when I told some of my buddies, like some of them, even before they said congratulations, one of them shook his head, said the last thing you do, like rule number one on a goat hunt is you don't shoot a deer. And I was like, yeah, that's a good rule. That's a good rule. But sometimes you have to hike up past the deer country to get to the goat country, and it can be pretty tempting to take a deer. So
yeah, let me ask you a couple questions. So I know you had a goat tag. You said registration. Can you explain that? Because is it like as an Alaskan resident, do you kind of get like one of everything? That's my assumption here, but you tell me how this works.
Yeah, pretty much. So you have your over-the-counter tags for a resident, which you can just go and you can buy. So if you came up to Alaska, you could also, in certain areas, you could just pick up 2 deer tags or 4 deer tags, depending on the unit. Okay. Same thing with, I think some areas you can do harvest ticket for caribou, you can do harvest ticket for caribou, harvest ticket for black bear, but there are also some other areas where you have to draw. There's some really good caribou units that you have to draw, or tags that you have to draw. Mountain goat you have to draw in a couple of units, but a registration is kind of like an in-between. So me as a resident, I can draw a mountain goat that's in a really good area. I can do a registration mountain goat, which means that they're keeping closer tabs on how many tags are allotted, and you have to see or have it and check it in within 5 days. That they have an idea of how many they want killed or can be killed.
Okay.
And then if that is reached, then they can shut it down. But the area I was hunting, I don't think they've ever shut it down because they've reached the allotment of what they want for the kill, or what, because it's all pretty wild here. So if you take
Okay.
a couple out, like it's not going to be a huge deal.
Got it. Got it.
But
I
yeah,
was wondering if it was more like, go ahead.
we don't have preference points or anything like that. So it's the most fair. So even an out of state person, if you're trying to get an elk tag up here, or you're trying to get a caribou tag or a grizzly bear tag or Dall sheep tag, you have the same percentage possibility as a resident. So a lot of Alaskans don't like that because, if I live here, if I endure the winters here, I should have a better chance at getting some of these really premium tags. But I have the same, it's fair, totally fair as far as, hunter to hunter, not in state to not in state. But there are benefits to being a resident. Obviously, the hunting license, I think it's like $65, and then I can get 4 deer tags for free. My bear, it was free. My registration mountain goat tag was free. So that's all. It's all pretty nice.
Okay. That sums it up. I was thinking, like, is this more like Colorado, or is this more like in Texas, where I currently live? And I just bought my super combo in Texas, and I get like 4 turkeys and 3 deer, or maybe even more than that. But yeah, I get a selection of animals. So it sounds like you guys have kind of a combo of the two.
Yeah, I'm going on a caribou hunt, and so I went. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game has an awesome app, and you can print out your over-the-counter tags from the app. And so I was like, whoa, okay, I'm going to be up on this caribou hunt with my buddy. I'm just a meat hauler because he drew a tag. So I'm like, well, let's print out a grizzly bear tag just in case. Let's print out a Dall sheep tag just in case. Let's print out, moose tag just in case. So that's pretty sweet to be a resident, get some of those. It's a really good caribou area, but we're going to be in an area like doesn't really overlap a whole lot with sheep. But if there happens to be a sheep that happens to be down low, and it happens to be, all it's costing me is the cost of a print of paper that I printed out. So
yeah.
Pretty nice.
And you never know, right? I was elk hunting, and we were up there, had a game camera up on this saddle that we were like, we know that the elk are coming through here, and we got photos of antelope at like 11,000 feet, and we're like, that doesn't make any damn sense.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to come through the day that you're there. So if you can get a tag, why not, right?
Yeah. The last thing I'd want to do is be there, and my buddy gets his caribou, and I'm like, oh, there's a sheep right here, or look at this awesome moose, and I don't have a tag. Like, just might as well do it. So
yeah, absolutely, especially it's just as much as printing a piece of paper. So
yeah,
cool, Jeff. All right, well, let's keep going, man. What else you got for us? Hopefully not too many poop stories, but I like the wedding one.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting when you live in a certain area and you do the certain hunts. Like, it's what's just normal or ordinary to someone else is like, whoa, that's crazy wild. Like, people spend hours and hours just explaining tags and tickets and whatnot. So, in Southeast Alaska, just the fact that I have to back up sometimes and say, oh yeah, we took my 18-foot skiff to get there. And, when we leave the skiff, we have to anchor it, or we have to let it go dry. And then you're hiking up the side of the mountain. We're going from sea level up to 3,000 feet, and there's no trail. There's maybe a game trailer. Maybe someone is coming through and tagged it. So I'll tell the mountain goat success story from this year then, as a lead in to dinner. So we went to this spot again, took the skiff, and we're hiking up, and we gained, I think it was 2,700 feet in about 2.6 miles. And so it's pretty steep, and there's a couple areas where we had to have some ropes to get up, but you're getting into like bona fide mountain goat territory. So we set up camp and pretty exhausted, but we just go to glass a little bit and see just this monster buck, and I'm excited about the monster buck. And then we also see a mountain goat. So I think, oh geez, we got both, and we're trying to get my wife a mountain goat. I got one last year, and so we're trying to get her one. So as we're going around this, it's a pretty steep. It's got sheer cliffs on each side. That's where you see a lot of the mountain goats. The old billies, the old cagey billies, would be down on there on this side, and they'll be totally visible, but they're just in a spot that you can't access. They feel totally safe, and it's at halfway down this cliff. What are you going to do about it, hunter?
Yeah.
Right? You're going to shoot me? You're not getting me. I'm either going to fall down there, I'm going to stay here, and you're going to die trying to get me. So sometimes you can catch them when they're kind of feeding out. So that's what we were hoping to find, like a nice lone billy that was walking around somewhere. So the fact that we saw a nice buck and a nice billy in the same area is pretty crazy. Some people say that you don't see deer and goat in the same area. They just don't cohabitate very, very well. They don't really like each other, or for whatever reason, you don't see them together a whole lot, but they happen to be there. The top of the ridge was kind of rounded a little bit. And so there was some great texture up there, some great feed up there, and then also an opportunity to shoot something and not have it fall off a cliff. So we're making our way around this bowl. As we're making our way around, we lose track of both, because you try to get some sort of idea of where it is, look for landmarks, but there's, so many shoots and there's so many little tufts of vegetation. It's not like some of those, if you look at Alaska Dall sheep hunts, it's just like this white speck and then just nothing but scree. So it's, you're looking for this white speck that's going to stand out, but with everything so green and with so many patches of timber or alpine timber, it's hard to tell where things are. So we lost track of both of them, but we kept moving. And there were a couple different little ledges that we were going to look over that were kind of on the ridge. And so it's a little ledge and a 10-foot drop off or a 5-foot drop off rather than like the sheer cliffs on the sides. So when we got to where we thought the buck or the goat might be, kind of slowed down a little bit and kind of peek over the side, don't see anything. All right. So we grab the stuff and move a little bit further. And so I'm carrying the rifle, and I say, you should carry the rifle in case we see the goat. And my wife says, no. If we see the goat, I'll shoot it. If we see the deer, you shoot it. That way we don't have this who's going to shoot what, and there's no confusion. She said, we're probably not even going to see the goat anyway, because it was starting to feed up and was going to feed over the ridge anyway. So I'm like, all right, that's fair. So come over this little bit of a lip, and I see these antlers sticking up from behind this rock. And I think, oh my gosh, there it is. It's stinking right there, about 75 yards away. So I duck back behind, drop my pack, get down into a little bit of texture and rise up again, maybe cut 5 yards off it, but I'm more squared to it. The rock is still in the way, and just the antlers are sticking straight up, and it absolutely still. So I'm thinking, man, is it dead? Is it sleeping? What happened here? So I'm staring at that. I get set up and I'm totally still, got it in the sights, just staring at it. Wife is right next to me, and it's taken 15, 20 seconds, feels like 5 minutes. And then she says, the goat. And I look over to my left, and about 75 yards away is the stinking mountain goat. It's starting to come up over a different lip, and its head is just kind of like there staring at us, like floating in the air. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we thought that we'd try to make this move on one of the two, but neither would be there. But now we have deer bedded behind this rock, and we have mountain goat that apparently doesn't care that we're here, just staring right at us. And so I said, do you want the rifle? And she says, no. If we try to switch, we're going to lose both. So you just shoot the deer. When it stands up, shoot the deer. I'm like, all right. And like the deer is dead. It's just a matter of, as soon as it stands up, it's over. But it's just staying down there. So I looked over and I'd seen the mountain goat, and I looked back at the deer, and I can now see one eyeball from like behind the rock. I'm thinking, oh man, he is slowly lifting his head. It's an imperceptible amount of rising its head so it can see. So I'm thinking, oh man, he's getting ready to make a dash for it. So I'm just on him. I'm looking through the scope. And then Abby says, the goat disappeared. I'm like, okay, good. I feel better about this. The goat's gone. I'm going to shoot this deer. It's going to be a really nice buck. A couple seconds later, she says, the goat's back. It had dropped down and walked toward us. And rather than just like peek its head over, its whole body was now up and was staring right at us, frontal at about 70 yards. So both of these are just chip shots. And I'm still looking at the buck. And now, because I glanced to the side just a little bit to check out the goat, I glance back to the deer, and now I can see both eyes and the top of its head. And I put the crosshairs right on the top of its head, but I'm not going to take that shot. Like some people take headshots, but I'm confident as a shooter, but stuff happens. So I didn't want to take out.
Proposing, you're pretty lethal.
Exactly. Then I'm spraying because I'm nervous. But everybody who shoots off an antler is a confident shooter who knew they could make the shot, but then didn't. Or anybody who shoots the jaw off a deer is a confident shooter who just in that moment, and so I didn't want to be one of those. So I'm just like, man, just like right there, totally stable. I got a nice bipod. I got a perfect rest. And then Abby says, it's broadside. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I look over for a second, and I see that the goat has now fed its way is this standing broadside. And in the second I take to look over and check out the goat and look back at the deer is up and bounding away. And so I could have pivoted
Really?
and I'm watching it through the scope and I have a shot at it, but it's running away. It's already turned. I'm like, gosh, dang it. And so I'm kind of upset because the deer got away. But then almost instantly, I'm like, okay, we got a goat now. We got to focus on goat. And so I slide Abby the rifle, and like the goat just didn't care. The goat didn't care that we were there. The goat didn't care that the buck had spooked. It just kept feeding broadside. And then I'd been telling my wife, I said, okay, be ready to take 3 shots because mountain goat are notorious for just sucking up bullets. I was on a hunt with a buddy a couple of years ago, and he shot with a 300 win, and it just dropped it. And there was like a 3 count, and then the thing just like stood up again. It was like, I'm not dead. Now I'm pissed. And then it took another shot to fully kill it. But just those things are so stinking tough.
Huh.
So I whispered, not like an urgent. I didn't want to be too like, hey, shoot 3 times, shoot, just like be ready for 3. And she shot it right in the heart, and the thing just drops and dies. It just totally exploded the heart. I was like, well, no, 1 works as well. So,
Yeah.
It was just crazy that we had the opportunity to get both deer and a goat. And then she ends up just hearting this goat. And so we walk over to it, and I just can't believe it's just totally Alaska thing. Took care of the goat, and then the sun set, and then we had dinner there, and then just hiked back to camp in the dark. And there you go.
That's amazing, man. I can't
mountain goat
believe,
tacos.
right? So many people like struggle to get like 1 opportunity, and there you are with like 2 animals, just almost, pick which one you want here. Let me ask, if they were both standing there and you could have shot either one, which one would you have shot? Like, I know that the deer didn't give itself to you there as much as the goat did, and so that's why the goat was chosen. But like, if you had equal opportunity on both, what do you do there?
I would have taken the goat. Like if it was just me, I would have taken the goat just because it's a little bit more prestigious and the meat's good and everything. I love blacktail hunting. But it was perfect that it worked out because I know that if I would have shot the buck and the goat would have been there, or even if the goat wasn't there, we definitely would have thought that, man, this would have been this is kind of a redemption hunt for my wife. Cause last year when we got my mountain goat, she wasn't feeling very well, was having some health issues. So she really struggled to get up the mountain. And so this was kind of her circled hunt for the year. She wanted a mountain goat hunt. She wanted to get back up there, and she wanted to kind of have this redemption hunt. And so if I shot this nice buck, I'd be totally excited at the big buck, and she'd be stoked for me because she's really supportive. But then, we would have had to go up there again. So it ended up working out perfectly. And then, people ask why we didn't have 2 rifles, and we could have taken both, but there are certain mountains where, you kind of put yourself in that situation, and some people do a lot of shuttling of meat, but this is not the type of mountain that you wanted to be doing a whole lot of shuttling meat with. You have 2 big animals, and you're packing in the dark, and part of the stuff was pretty steep snow that we had to traverse, and some other areas that were pretty steep, and you had to really be careful with your stepping. So to do that at night was tough enough, and there's bears around and wolves around. So I know it sounds like a whole bunch of excuses, but the shuttling thing we're definitely up for that. But in certain contexts, certain mountains, a goat and a deer, that'd be a little bit much. And so,
I get that.
Yeah.
I was thinking you asked, like, people ask you about why you didn't have 2 guns. That's not my question. My question is like, after that situation, now are you going to have 2 guns?
I don't know. And we have such a long season. We have a 4-month deer season. Same thing with goats. So we don't have that same sort of sense of urgency. It's not the same sort of sacrifice. It doesn't mean that we're casual about it, but as a resident, we can do that again. And so the more you can have those experiences, and if you haven't saved up a ton of money for the guide, and you haven't done the fly out, and these are your 7 days to hunt, or this is the 10 days, and you've saved up 5-10 years for this, and this is going to be the hunt of a lifetime. It's not necessarily the hunt of a lifetime for us. And again, that doesn't mean that we don't value it. It doesn't mean that it's not incredibly special or awesome, but
just different investment. It's a different
investment
for you than it is for us.
It's just different. Us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like in whenever Labor Day is, we're going to go back maybe to that area and look for another mountain goat, or go to a spot that has some really good deer genetics. And so we might pass up a bunch of deers to get to something that's really, really special. And so that's just kind of the program up here. Things are, we take it for granted sometimes just how special it is and how amazing it is. And while people are worried about, where are they going to be able to hunt, and because they didn't draw anything in Colorado, they have to go to Wyoming, or, they're worried about their over the counter stuff in Colorado because there's going to be so many people here and so much orange, and you can get to the spot on time. And when my wife was in Wyoming, we did some hunting there, and she got an elk tag, and we got mule deer tags. And so we did that whole thing and went out to a couple spots like a week before to scout, and people had already set up their tents. They'd claim their spot, and then they would go back into town for the week and, do their jobs and whatnot, knowing that camp was already established up there. And it's just a different, what you have to do is different. So we can just really, really have some really special, fun experiences without that. Maybe it's desperation. Maybe it's just that limited, you want to make the most out of the time. So we'll just keep to one rifle. Maybe we'll take two, depending on where it goes. For deer hunt, we definitely do split up when we go deer hunting on some of these other peaks. And so she'll go one way with her rifle. I'll go one way with my rifle. But the mountain goat, just the terrain is different. Animals are different. You're looking at, maybe even double the amount of meat that you get out of that. And then, of course, taking at least part of the hide out, and you have to take the whole skull out to have it measured. So just a lot of extra weight and stuff like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, that's a great story, Jeff. That was really fun, and I can't imagine having that kind of opportunity. Like it blows my mind to just be sitting there with like multiple species and tag and pocket for all of them. So
yeah,
cool. Thank you for sharing, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. What else you got, man? This is keep going.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like for Alaska stories, I always been the type of person who, I grew up here in Southeast, and when you're in elementary school, you hear stories about people who are on boats that capsize, and you hear stories about, hunters that get lost and the Coast Guard has to pick them up. And so I think I wouldn't say that I'm timid, but all that stuff that I remember growing up has made me be a pretty cautious hunter, and I evaluate risks. And there are times where it's like, okay, that's not worth it. I've been in some areas where, it's super, super steep, but, just kind of knowing the limits, and like when to push and when not to push. And when things, couple times, even during August, you can get hypothermic, and there were times where I've been like, yeah, I know where this leads. I'm soaking wet. I'm not moving, even though I'm underneath my tarp. It's 47 degrees and it's rainy and I'm wet and I can't feel my toes. Gosh dang it. I'm going to have to move. I'm going to have to walk. I'm going to have to walk around. I'm going to have to get the blood moving because, that's just kind of what happens. And so I'd rather not have crazy epic stories where crazy stuff happens, because,
right.
when this isn't a matter of, like, a lot of places we hunt, you don't have cell phone service. And then the rescue isn't a matter of people driving to an area and hiking around as a search party. Like, a lot of this stuff is Coast Guard rescue type stuff. And, if you do have to be rescued by the Coast Guard, they don't also take your boat and they don't take all the stuff. They don't pick up your goat or your deer or whatever for you. They pick just you up to rescue you. So I think that's kind of instilled in me. And so I'm not willing to take maybe some of the risks that other people are.
Yeah.
But I'm happy with not having crazy stories. I'm happy that when people do hear some of my stories, like, man, that's crazy. I'm like, well, that's kind of the norm here. It's just the way things are. It's Alaska and everything that goes with it. So the rain, the wet, the terrain, the cold, the bears, all that stuff is just part of it. And sometimes as an Alaskan, or, you just, forget to tell part of it. Just the way some people, in Wyoming dealing with grizzly bears, they're just like, well, it just happened. So
just what it is.
Yeah.
And maybe your normal is a little bit more crazy than our normal. And that's why you're like, okay, I'm going to stop right there at the normal. Because you say you're not doing crazy things, but that goat hunt, the steep snow hills, sounds crazier than anything that I've ever tried. Makes me nervous. I would like to try it, but I don't know if I'd go much farther past that point. And for you, it's your normal. So, but it's pretty amazing either way. But yeah, do you have any more stories, or are those what you got for us? If that's it, that's totally fine. But if you have some more you want to share.
I'm trying to think, trying not to sound super ordinary, but yeah, shoot, I think it's been pretty A caribou hunt I did in March. It was a registration hunt a couple of years ago. I think it was 2021. Went up there. A buddy lives in Fairbanks, and we're just going to run his standard hunting program for winter caribou. And it's the 40-mile herd. So there's a quota that's set in the late summer, and it's usually filled very, very early because there's so many people. It's pretty accessible to Fairbanks and North Pole. So people go out there and they're driving their ATVs around, and it's just a slaughter. And I think you have like 48 hours to check in your kill. That way they can keep tabs of the numbers. And as soon as the quota is reached, they just shut it down. So to prevent having habitat totally ruined by ATVs going over the tundra, they'll open it again in the winter. So that's residents only. And so you're driving snow machines over the snow.
Okay.
And at that point, the bulls have dropped their antlers. The cows still have their antlers. And based on their migration, the herd had grown to such a size that biologists were worried that there wasn't enough habitat there for them to eat. They were going to starve because there just wasn't enough for them to eat. And so to manage the herd, they opened up another quota during the winter, and you could shoot cows. And so fly up there during spring break of March. So I'm taking my spring break by going up to Fairbanks, and it was -30. So just the standard program. Again, my buddy's got 2 snow machines. We leave Fairbanks. We drive about 2.5 hours outside of town, and you can't put ice melt down on the roads because it's going to melt the ice, but it's just going to refreeze. And the stuff that you put down that lowers the freezing temperature, that stuff doesn't get the temperature low enough to actually thaw anything. So like the road is just ice, and it's going to be encased in ice for the next couple of months. So there's no reprieve from the cold. There's no reprieve from the ice, but it's a very dry ice. So when you're driving on the road, the snow is very dry too. So when you're driving on the road, it actually provides some sort of like a tacky traction almost.
It's
terrified.
The liquid, right? Or like the thin layer of like the ice melting that actually makes it slippery. When it's super dry, it's not all that.
Yeah. And you guys get a lot of that in like the down south, the Midwest, the Wyoming, Colorado. It's the wet stuff that's really bad. And that's what we get here in Southeast, that really, really wet, heavy snow.
Yeah, I lived in Washington for a few years, and it doesn't snow often, but when it does, it is gross.
Horrible. So heavy. Horrible. So as we're driving, I'm kind of white knuckling because we got this trailer. We're driving this old beater of a truck, and we're going up and down these hills and whatnot. So I'm kind of nervous, but he's just, no big deal. It's just his program. No big deal. Get out there. We'd make the 15 to 20 mile little circuits on the snow machines. And I'd never been in this sort of habitat before when it's this cold. We'd been up there a couple of times for basketball tournaments when I was a basketball coach. But you're in a gym, and then we're driving from the hotel to the gym, and that's it. So being on a snow machine out in the cold, I'm thinking, all right, well, no skins. I can't have any bare skin because that's going to freeze, especially going on the snow machines. All right, good. What about sweat? He said, well, yeah, don't sweat because that liquid will freeze. So I'm thinking, okay, what about when I take my hand out of my glove and touch the trigger? Like, is it going to freeze to the trigger? What's going to happen here? So he said, no, you're probably going to be fine. Just don't sweat. So on the snow machine, we're going around, but there's hand warmers on the handlebars. And so my hands are kind of sweating in the gloves on the handlebars. I'm thinking, oh man, this is not good. What do I do? And he's like, oh, no, you're fine. Just take your hands out real quick. It'll kind of evaporate, put them back in there. Good. So I've got all these stupid questions. I haven't been on a snow machine very much. We're going through some of these areas that have 6 to 8 feet of snow in these little depressions. Do these little circuits, nothing. A couple little circuits, nothing. We're about ready to head back into town because it's like 3 p.m, but it's starting to get dark. And as we're heading back, we see another truck is pulled over, and they had 4 or 5 caribou on sleds that they were being dragged by the snow machines. And so my buddy tries to stop, but of course he hits the brakes a little bit and he starts sliding. But he gets it turned around, and we rolled down the window and asked the guy, say, hey, you find some caribou? And he said, do you have a coffee percolator? And we're like, no, we got a pot to boil water. He's like, all right, that's close enough. The caribou are 4 miles that way. And it was pretty cool because it was I'll tell you where they are, but you got to give me something. And we just want to make some coffee. So if you got a pot, I'll give you the information. So, and it's resident only hunt. So it wasn't like there was no really benefit. If it's negative 30 degrees outside, there's really no benefit to anybody. Like, well, I'm not going to tell you where it is. You have to do your own work. It's like, man, we're just here to get meat.
Yeah.
So
And it's for
there's
the benefit of the herd, right? The biologists
benefit of the
know the
herd.
quota that needs to be
Yeah.
filled. So yeah.
If we were really out trophy hunting or having a lot of fun, we would have done it in the August, and he may have done it in the August one too. But it's the dead of winter. You're starting to come out. The quota hasn't been filled yet. It was a nice weekend. Let's just go out and get it. So we're taking the snow machines out there, and we actually see a couple that are down off the ridge that are before the 2 mile or the 4 mile mark. So it's only about 2 miles. Oh, perfect. So we get off the snow machines and kind of slide down a little bit, and then shoot 2 cows, go down there, start taking care of them. One of them was so big we actually had to cut it in half because we couldn't get up the steep slope on the snow machine with the entire thing on it. So I had to cut it in half, go up with the snow machine, come back down, get the second half. And I'm not used to wrangling snow machines. And so every time I got off into the soft snow, like I'd kind of get it stuck. So my buddy Harrison had to come over and kind of get it out. So it was taking some time. And then of course, like while you're processing this animal, I'm sweating, which again is like the thing you don't want to do. It's negative 30 degrees. And so I got a base layer. I got my fleece pants. I got my Sitka puffy pants. And then a lot of times the guides or the stuff that people are using is not like the marketed hunting gear. There's this brand called Refrigerwear that's just these super good overalls that insulate, and that's what the people on the ice road trucks use, or the people that work. If you're working on in a trade in the outdoors in interior Alaska, you need something that's going to keep you warm, but that's good enough it's got reinforced knees and things like that. And so Refrigerwear makes these great bibs, but because they're not hunting gear, it was like $150, but it's rated to negative 15 or something like that. So I'm like, is this real, man? If I was going to buy like the Sitka version of this, these would be like $700. Yeah. So I got all these layers on, but now I'm kind of working hard, and so as I'm going back to the truck, man, I'm sweating. I'm thinking, man, we got to keep going, and I really hope that these snow machines don't break, because if one of them breaks down and all of a sudden we're immobile again, you can stay warm as long as you're moving. But as soon as you stop moving, things change. And I'm getting heat from the snow machine. I'm getting heat from the hand warmers. But there's some sweat in there, and I'm a little bit worried about that. But there's this great shot Harrison got of us as we're heading back to the car or back to his truck, and like the skies kind of turned purple in that pre-sunset or that post-sunset look, and it's beautiful. And then we get back to the truck, and the guys who had got their caribou, all of them were back now, and they'd waited for us. Just to make sure, because you're about an hour and a half from sunset, and these guys are heading out on their snow machines. It's negative 30 degrees. Just that, we talk a lot about hunters crowding areas and hunters shooting deer, elk, or whatever out from underneath us, or crowding our spots, or doing ridiculous things. But there's also hunters who are ethical and are great and will help you out. So not only did they tell us where the caribou were, but also waited for us just to make sure, because they had taken off, and then they could get back to town and hear about some rescue operation to recover the bodies of 2 people whose snow machine broke down and one froze to death and the other one. So the fact that that might be a little bit dramatic, but those sort of things happen possible. When it's when it's negative 30, man. It's like, that's definitely not a prime time. So that was super cool. And just that, don't know who those guys were, don't know what their names are. They gave the pot back, and I was just very thankful for that sort of attitude. And there's a lot of good hunters like that, lower 48 too. It's not an exclusive to winter hunts in Fairbanks or to Alaska. There's so many great hunters out there. And a lot of times we don't hear about them because we only hear the stories about the bad, rude, or the other ones, the ones who, do unethical things or do mean things or rude things or bad things. So there's a lot of really good hunters out there too. So got back to Harrison's place. The Northern Lights were spectacular as we were driving home, which is pretty sweet. Get back to Harrison's place, and we can't leave the caribou outside because it'll freeze solid and we won't be able to bone it out and get it ready, put in my cooler. So Harrison's wife was gone. So we put down a tarp in the door entryway and put the caribou on there. so that it would, and then drop the temperature in the house so the caribou would stay cool, but it wouldn't freeze. And so,
I like that you preface that with your buddy's wife was gone, because that's a very important point.
Yeah, and she probably wouldn't have. She probably would have said, "Oh, Harrison, really?" But also realizing that, yeah, what else are you going to do? Like it's going to be frozen outside for the next months. You can't freeze solid, otherwise you're not going to be able to process it. So woke up in the morning, took care of the caribou, and then had a couple extra days because that was the first day, and I was going to be out there all week. So we took the snow machines out to do some pike fishing. I'd never done ice fishing like that before, so we went. I think it was like 30 miles, just zigzagging down this river to get to this spot that is like the spot, and caught some pike. And it was kind of crazy setting them back through the ice because the river was frozen almost all the way thick, and so you got to like push the thing down to get it through the 8 feet of ice down to the bottom there, because we weren't going to keep all of them. So just a wild experience. And it's Alaska's it's so
like,
vast.
I don't. It is, man. And it's crazy to me that you're like, I don't have any crazy stories because I don't want to do anything too crazy. And then you go on this crazy caribou hunt, and then you go 30 miles down a frozen river. Like, these are crazy stories, Jeff. You got to have some perspective here. You're living a lot of guys' dreams with the stuff that you think is just normal. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's cool too. Alaska's so vast. The Southeast is a lot more like Pacific Northwest, a lot more like the Seattle, but it's much more rural. It's made up of 1,700 islands. So a lot of times you're taking boats to get to these other areas. And my buddies in the interior, they talk about running rivers, and so I'm like, oh man, I'd be so nervous running a jet boat on some of these rivers on moose hunts, just because you got sweepers, you got debris, and rivers change course based on water and runoff and all that. But then they talk about dealing with the tides down here, and they'd be panicked about anchoring up their boat and leaving it overnight, because what happens if it drags anchor? What happens if the wind picks up and your boat ends up on the rocks? And so and then you can talk about the north of the Brooks Range, where it's even more different. It's just, there's so many different ecosystems within the state, which makes it totally wild. So I go up to the interior Alaska, and I feel like, almost like a non-resident, because it's just so foreign to me. I need really good rain gear. I'm hunting bear and deer and mountain goat. And then you go up there, and it's, Dall sheep and caribou, and it's stinking cold. So it's pretty wild, but pretty cool to be able to have those experiences and have friends there where I can go and do that stuff.
Yeah. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but isn't Alaska like basically 1/3 the size of the continental United States?
Yeah, I think if you were to overlay it on the U.S. or the lower 48, like I would live in Florida, and then my buddy Harrison and Fairbanks would like be in Iowa or something like that, and then the Brooks Range would be in Minnesota, I think, or the Point Barrow way up north would be in So it's, and then the Aleutian chain would go all the way to California. So it's pretty huge.
Yeah, man. It's I think, to be honest, it's a lot of hunters' dreams. Like when you were to ask any hunter, like, what's your dream hunt? Maybe some Eastern guys might say like, Western elk hunt. But I think most people would say like something in Alaska, whether it's caribou or moose or Dall or goats or whatever it is. It's like there's something about it that's really special. And it's cool that it's your everyday life, Jeff. I'm a little bit jealous, but I'm also like not too jealous, because a lot of the stuff you've talked about terrifies me. So
yeah, well, and also even October here, we get about 18 inches of rain, and we get maybe 3 or 4 days of sunlight. So living through that, like October here is miserable. And then Southeast here, and in January and February, we have, we can go 3 weeks without seeing the sun. And so it's gray. And so while my buddy Harrison up in Fairbanks, it's blue sky, but it's -30, at least he can see the sun. At least he sees blue sky. So when it's damp and gray, 39 degrees and rainy, and you go through this cycle where you're going to school or you're going to work and it's dark, and because it rained the previous day, but then it dropped down below freezing at night, you're driving on black ice to work. And then it rains a little bit that evening and then refreezes. And you got 5-6 days in a row of driving on black ice in the dark. You get to work and it's gray. And you come home from work and it's gray or getting dark again. So it really, really weighs on you. So that is, man, we get to have some awesome adventures up here, but we certainly pay for it.
Yeah, I'm sure. It sounds familiar, I'm sure to a lesser extent, but I lived in Washington, like I said, for 4.5 years, and it felt very much like that, just like rainy, gray, go to work in the dark, come home in the dark. Wasn't a lifestyle that particularly my wife could handle, and so that's why we moved back to Colorado in their 300 days of sunshine. So
I will tell you what, though, the when I've been driving in that Front Range area, and I was actually born in Colorado, and so
really?
my grandparents lived in Greeley. My parents went to UNC in Greeley, so we spent a lot of time there and during the summers, and just seeing. There used to be like separate cities. You'd have Fort Collins, and then there would be a break, and then you'd get to Denver, and there'd be a break. You get to Colorado Springs. Now it's all just like one city. So the amount of traffic that people have to drive through is just astonishing, and the amount of time spent on is that I-25 that goes right through there.
I-25 from like Denver north up to Fort Collins is just gone to hell. It's crazy.
Commuting on that, especially during construction when there's no space whatsoever. Like that is
construction.
You cannot expand it fast enough in order to accommodate the people. Right? So that to me would be more miserable. Like I can slow down to 17 miles an hour if I need to on the black ice. It's going to be okay. There's no stoplight. There's one stoplight, but it's always green on the way up, or, it's going to be okay. I can slow down. And then my commute is like either 17 minutes or like 22 minutes, depending on how many cruise ships are in town in May and September. So, I'll take those gray months over the traffic that you guys have year round.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So, well, Jeff, man, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, man. Unless you have something else, I think we'll call it. Maybe you can tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can look at some of the other stories that I got, the ordinary, average, everyday stories here at Alaska Lund. I try to keep not just hunting related, but also hunting, fishing, and kind of life. And so if you follow at Alaska Lund on social media, it's kind of a year-round look of teaching and life in Ketchikan. I keep it to the entire life, not just specific to hunting or fishing. So at Alaska Lund on Instagram, go to On Step Alaska is the website. That's where I park the columns I write for the Juneau Empire, as well as the podcast episodes I do. The podcast is called On Step Alaska. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all those. Oh, and my book, Beyond the Hunt, is available on Amazon. You can order that there or at my website. So
awesome, man. Awesome. I will put links to all of that in the show notes. So anyone who's listening and interested in following up, please check it out. Man, Jeff, this was fun. This is very different than anything we've heard before. So I appreciate you first off reaching out, and then second of all, entertaining us with some crazy stories.
Thanks. I appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing here. It's it's good. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. Well, thanks again. All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. I want to thank Jeff, of course, for coming on the podcast. It was a ton of fun hearing his stories of what his everyday, not too crazy adventures, which to me sound pretty damn crazy. But thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you. Make sure you guys go out there and follow him on Instagram. Check out his podcast. I put links to everything in the show notes, so it's nice and easy to find. Beyond that, guys, if you have a story that you want to share, reach out to me. I'd love to have you on. I'd love to hear your crazy stories. And then, of course, finally, share the podcast with someone. Follow us on Instagram. Wherever you're listening right now, make sure to follow us there, too, and give us a review. Hopefully 5 stars. If not, that's fine. Let me know why. But yeah, guys, thank you again for tuning in. I'm having a great time. Hope you're having a good time listening. Now get out there and make some stories of your own.